Good morning. These are amazing people. And I had the privilege to work alongside them, and I learned a lot. Amazing leaders. But the gift that they brought to me was the way they served with unbelievable humility and grace and honor. And I love these guys. And I'm so grateful to be here. It is an honor. And I walk in and I look at this place, and it feels like home. So I'm proud to wear the T-shirt.
Yes. And yes, it does look better on you.
I want to share a few things this morning and some things that I got to share this morning with 20-Minute Church, which was awesome. But I'm going to share a little bit more in detail, a little bit more of my journey. I wrote a book called Finish Strong. And this morning we're going to talk about how do we finish strong. Where's the fight? And understanding where the fight is. And if we understand where the fight is, then we know how to engage the fight. We can find kingdom strategies for that. Because here's the truth. If you're on this side of eternity, you're a wrestler. Men, women, children, you're in a wrestling match. Pastor said it this morning. He was quoting somebody that pretty significant. It was Jesus, I believe, that said this.
Yes, it was.
In this world, you'll find trouble. In this world, you're going to find a struggle. In this world, in other words, what Jesus has said, you're in a wrestling match. How many wrestlers we got in here? Oh, you all better have those hands up. You're all wrestlers. So we're going to talk about the fight. We're going to talk about where the fight is. I was in 2007, I was coaching our World Cup team. I'm in Antalya, Turkey. I'm sitting in the hotel lobby. It's 3:36 in the morning. I'm waiting for taxi cabs to come pick us up for take us to the airport for an 18-hour trip home. We just competed in the World Cup. In fact, the perennial powerhouse in wrestling is Russia. And if you've got any Russian blood in you, you are a double wrestler. It's in your blood. We faced Russia in the semifinals, and we beat them. I don't think they just heard me. We beat Russia in the semifinals. And then lost to the Ukraine in the finals. So our team was the second best team in the world. And I'm sitting in the hotel lobby, 3:36 in the morning. And I'm sitting next to Joe Warren. Now, Joe Warren's tagline, he's now fights for Bellator. He's won some titles. He's known as the baddest man on the planet. Joe's sitting next to me. Now, Joe had just went undefeated through the World Cup. He was our reigning world champion. And he looked at me and said, "Coach, I've got a question for you." I said, "What's that, Joe?" He said, "How do you finish strong?" Well, that's a great question, but listen, that's a really big question for 3:36 in the morning. So I did the best I could to try to answer this very heartfelt, sincere question, and I could not get that question out of my head. I just began to feel the Lord challenge me with this question: how do you finish strong? So I began to sit down and write my journey. And I felt like what God was asking me is to reflect and to look at the first 40 years of my life and say, what is the last season of your life going to look like? What have you learned? What are the things that you can take hold of? Which meant I had to get pretty honest with some things. And there are things in here that was hard to write because they're places of shame, they're places of struggle, they're places of hurt. as I wrote it, I began to find how Jesus met me in every one of those places. And so I want to talk this morning about this idea of how do we finish strong? Where's the fight? Where's the enemy of my soul trying to engage me? I spent 8 years as an Olympic solidarity instructor. What that is the International Olympic Committee would take people and they would have them go into developing nations and help them build grassroots sports. I would help them build an Olympic committee, and we'd begin to look at how to begin little sports programs with the idea that they'd be welcomed and invited into the Olympic Games eventually. I was assigned to Federated States of Micronesia. I was assigned to the nation of Palau. Anybody ever been to Palau? It was a really rough assignment. Palau is one of the most beautiful islands on the planet. It's stunning in its beauty, but the people are remarkable. Amazing people. And I had my group of athletes, and they took me out on the water one day, and I'm in this boat, and we're going through, and you can look down in the water. You can see all the way down to the very bottom of the ocean floor. See these beautiful fish swimming through, and while we were on that boat, as we pulled into this cove, a big black-tipped shark started circling the boat. I'm terrified of sharks. Living in Gresham, you see them all the time. And I've watched a lot of Jaws movies. I could feel this idea of the shark as it's circling the boat, that it was going to come up out of the water. It was going to grab a hold of me, and it was going to pull me right in. Da-da. Da-da. I mean, you could hear the music. And my athletes began to taunt me, tease me. They said, jump in the water. What's a man to do when his manhood's being challenged? A wise man would have done that, but I'm on that boat, and I when they start taunting me, it's a place where, okay, I'm gonna show these guys. I'm gonna face my fear, and I jumped into that water. The moment I hit the water, all of my senses exploded in excitement. I mean, everything, all of those senses, the touch, the feel, I want to be completely aware of my environment because there's a shark in the water. And I'm trying to get back to the boat, and just about the time I'm getting to a place where there's hope that I'm going to get on this boat, my athletes took the boat right out of the cove. In fact, I couldn't even see them. They went so far. And now I'm remembering my Jaws learning from watching all the Jaws movies, and I'm thinking, I've got to not flail in the water. Because if you start flailing and you start splashing, they're going to think you're wounded prey, and that shark's going to come after me. So I'm doing long, smooth strokes, and I'm trying to glide. Well, I'm a terrible swimmer. And it seemed like an eternity before I could get to the boat. And once I got there, they pulled me out of the boat, and they said, what's that? They pulled me out of the water onto the boat, and they said to me, you didn't need to be afraid of that shark. They're a timid shark. But they said the moment you got close to the boat, we saw a saltwater crocodile coming after you. And they said they're very fast in the water. They said they're very powerful jaws, very sharp teeth. Don't be distracted by sharks when there's a crocodile in the water. What lies below the surface of the ocean of our lives really does matter. And I want to tell you this morning, there's a crocodile in the water. There's times in our life when we don't sense God, we don't feel His presence. It seems like He's taken the boat right out of the cove of our life. But we need to understand that God may be taking care of the crocodile in your life. I didn't even know they had saltwater crocodiles in Palau. I was distracted by a black-tip shark. And I want to tell you, in my life, the enemy of my soul has been very good at getting me distracted with a lot of things that don't matter when there's a crocodile in the water. I was reading the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13:13, where it says this: these three things shall remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these, and I saw this passage in a way I've never seen it before. I began to understand this is where the fight is. This is the only place where the fight is. These three are eternal. These things are to last. These are the things that matter: faith, hope. Everything else on this side of eternity is a distraction. Jesus said this, not only that we'd have trouble in this world. That encourages me. I don't know if that encourages you. Because guess what I found on this side of eternity? A whole lot of trouble. And it encourages me that Jesus said it would be so. Otherwise, I think there's something wrong with me. There's lots of things wrong with me. But this I know. I know one that's in the boat of my life chasing off the crocodile. But what's the crocodile after? Jesus said this: there's a thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Listen, he wants to steal your faith. He wants to kill your hope. And he wants to destroy your love. And it's the only three things he really wants. But he is a master at getting you distracted with a whole lot of other things. Don't be distracted by sharks when there's a crocodile in the water. This morning, I want you to leave here knowing where the fight is. Where's the fight? Where's the fight? Faith, hope, and love. You have to engage it at that level. God's heart for us is to be a people of fearless faith, infectious hope, and relentless love. And the enemy of the soul knows that. I was 5 years old. I was at a big camp meeting, and I was sitting in the back, and the preacher said, is there anyone here that wants to say yes to Jesus, who wants to give their life to the Lord? I'm sitting next to my dad, and I start pulling on a shirt. I said, Dad, a little 5-year-old. You know how 5-year-olds can be. Dad. My dad looks over, and I said, Dad, I want that. And my dad grabbed me by the hand, and he walked me all the way to the front, and I got down on my knees, and I asked Jesus to be Lord of my life. 2 months later, I had a neighbor that abused me in ways that 5-year-olds should never be abused. Then I had an uncle that moved in with us. My grandmother had passed away, and he was very angry. He was very bitter, and he took his anger and bitterness on me, and he'd beat me physically every single day, and he'd say, Dan, you're no good. No one will ever love you, and you're never going to amount to anything. And those 3 lies got beat into me where I used to believe those lies. See, what I didn't understand at 5 years old, that there was an enemy of my soul that was already trying to steal my faith. My uncle was not my enemy. That neighbor was not my enemy. And I spent a huge portion of my life so distracted because of what had happened, and I'm fighting it at that level, not understanding what the crocodile was doing in my life. Stealing my faith. In fact, I spent my childhood hiding. I spent my childhood where I couldn't look people in the eyes. My freshman year of high school, I had great success in wrestling. Unbelievable success in wrestling. But the people that saw me in the high school hallways didn't know that I was the same guy that was wrestling on the wrestling mat. My classmates thought I was mentally disabled, and they treated me so, and I'd get so afraid of people. I dressed in strange clothes. I dressed strange because it kept people at a distance from me. Because I was afraid of people. I was afraid of the hurt and the pain, and I was fighting the wrong fight. There's an enemy of your soul that's out to steal your faith. There's an enemy of your soul that's out to kill your hope. Wrestling's taken me in a lot of amazing places, and there's doors open that happen because of wrestling. I got invited to go throughout the former Soviet Union. As Dave was saying, in 1995, I was ranked number 1 in the world. I won a major tournament in Russia, and it opened a door for me over there. So we're traveling with the team through the former Soviet Union, and we're doing wrestling camps and clinics. We're speaking in orphanages. We've got a pretty full schedule, and we get a phone call from a prison director who said, "We'd love to have dinner with you." He said, "We'd love to come if we can come speak to the prison." He says, "No, it's not possible." We found out that this prison was the highest security prison for the former Soviet Union, that this prison had only allowed one group of visitors ever in the history of this prison, and that was 13 years earlier. They let Cuban prison guards in that were touring and looking at the prison system in the Soviet Union, looking to implement something similar in Cuba. Only visitors that have ever been in there. We told them, if we can't come speak to the prison, we've got a full schedule, we're probably not going to be able to make the dinner. Well, after a few hours, we got a call back. He says, "Okay, it's possible." So we got to go to a prison that no one was allowed into. Now, the place that we were in was now Central Asia. It's now a very strict, very Muslim culture where to talk about Jesus being Lord of your life, or to talk about the hope that you have in Jesus, or to share a Bible, or to have a Bible, or to be a part of a gathering like this in a church where you have freedom. All of those things are illegal. We got to this prison, and if you could imagine, if you've ever seen a Holocaust film, you get a glimpse of what we saw. You had barbed wire fences around this complex, and on the other side of the barbed wire fences was another row of barbed wire fences, and in between the barbed wire fences, the prison director said, "We've got landmines." He said, "Stay on the path, follow me." I said, "We will do that." We get into this prison, and there's no way to describe the smell. They would have these big rooms like this that were filled with 100, 200 bunk beds where men would sleep in these big rooms. The prisoners, as you looked at them, they all had haircuts like mine, because we were told when we went in, they said, every prisoner here has skin diseases. There's huge lice problems, impetigo. I mean, it's a place where disease. They said over 50% of the prisoners here have tuberculosis. They not only encouraged us to stay on the path, but they said, do not touch any of the prisoners. Well, they brought brought us into a big room, and in this room there were over 1,000 prisoners gathered. And so we get up on the stage, and we thought, okay, we're wrestlers. We'll show them some wrestling moves. And so Dave always likes being thrown around. No, I'm just kidding. So we're throwing each other around, and we're doing, this. We're making it, loud and proud, and putting on this big wrestling demonstration, and over 1,000 prisoners sitting there and just hold themselves like this. And they weren't responding. And what I'll never forget about that prison is looking in their eyes. Have you ever seen people with eyes filled with absolute hopelessness? See, there's an enemy of your soul that wants to kill your hope. And I'm looking at over 1,000 prisoners that have no hope. Albert Camus, a writer, philosopher, said this: to lose one's life is a little thing, and I shall have the courage to do so when it's necessary. But to see the meaning of life dissipate, to see the meaning of life disappear, that's the unbearable thing, for man cannot live without meaning. And I'm looking at over 1,000 prisoners living life without meaning, living life without hope. Well, our interpreter that was interpreting for us, he was a wrestler, and he said, is there any prisoner here that wants to challenge any of these guys to a wrestling match? Now, we were told not to touch these guys as he's inviting them to come up and wrestle us. All of a sudden, the prisoner starts chanting a name. And up this prisoner stands, and he starts walking right down the aisle. And if you looked, you could see he had the ears. He was a wrestler. He was a wrestler. They got him up on the stage, and they said, is there anyone here that you want to challenge? And he pointed at me. But you need to understand, these prisoners were so frail, so weak, so malnourished. I shook his hand, and I just grabbed him by the shoulders, and I gently took him to the ground. Then the interpreter called me over and says, Dan, I want you to share the hope that you have. In a country where it's illegal to talk about Jesus, in a country where it's illegal to have a Bible, in a country where it's illegal to have a church, I got to stand in a prison with over 1,000 prisoners and to talk about the hope that I found in Jesus. And in the midst of this prison, I just shared an illustration with them because I thought I want them to understand that there's no difference between them and me. And the illustration was this. I said, you can take a little rock and you can throw it into a pond, and it says you'll get a little splash. You get little ripples. That rock will go all the way to the bottom. Or I said you can take a big rock. You can lift that rock and you can throw it into the water, and you'll get a really big splash and you get really big ripples. But it ends up in the same place as the little rock. That sin, no matter how small or how big, ends us all up in the same place, apart from the hope that we have in Jesus. As I began to share, there was a prisoner that was 3/4 of the way back, and he stood up and he raised his hands in the air and he began to cry out, "Hallelujah! Hallelujah!" Which means praise you, God. Praise you, God. In a prison where people are dying, in a prison where you're thrown in there, they were never coming out. In a prison where 50% of them or more had tuberculosis, all of them with skin diseases, this prisoner could stand and raise his hands and declare, "Praise you, God." Well, we got done, and every prisoner came forward, and I want you to hear me. We touched every single prisoner. Tuberculosis, skin disease. Because we believe that if Jesus is in us, disease ought to run. Disease ought to be afraid of us, not us being afraid of them. The man that stood and raised his hands, he came forward and he said, with the interpreter, he's explaining, he says, I've been praying. He said, I'm the only Christian in this prison. I'm all alone. And he said, no one can relate to the love that I have for Jesus. He said, I don't even have a Bible. I can't even read God's Word. And he says, I've been praying, and God loves me so much, He brought you here. Hallelujah. He was not caught up and focused on his circumstances. He was not caught up on the pain and the struggle and the disease. Because he had a hope that went beyond this side of eternity. A hope that would allow him to stand in the midst of the darkness and declare, praise you, God. Praise you, God. Well, the prison director came over and said, we've seen nothing like this before. You guys have to come back. We said, we'll have a team in next week. And we were able to get Bibles in that next week into every prisoner in that prison. And today, there's a church meeting inside that prison where it's illegal to have a church, illegal to have Bibles. And I want you to catch a hold of this. God loved those prisoners so much. That guy that was saying, praise you, God, he was thrown in that prison because he was a pastor. And that prison, if you're thrown in there, you're thrown in there to die. But God loved those prisoners so much that he would allow a pastor to be put inside that prison so that he could tell them about how much he loves them. See, sometimes we don't understand our circumstances. God, why would this happen? Why am I in this struggle? Why am I surrounded by all this pain and this darkness and disease? See, you get distracted. There's an enemy of your soul that's trying to kill your hope. But when you can get your eyes fixed on Him, the author and perfecter of your faith, when you get your eyes fixed on not the temporary, but fixed on the eternal, fixed on not the things that are seen, but those things that are unseen, there's a hope that is sure. There's a hope that is secure. There's a hope that allows you to stand up in the midst of that and raise your hands and declare, hallelujah! To declare it, because God, you're worthy. And I don't know what your circumstance or situation is, or how the enemy of soul has been trying to kill your hope, but listen, don't get your eyes fixed on the temporary or the circumstances or the things. We're distracted by the sharks when there's a crocodile in the water. We have to engage the fight at the area of hope. He wants to be people of fearless faith, and He wants us to be infectious with hope. Infectious hope. And He's placed you where He's placed you so that you can bring hope to those where the enemy of their souls has been killing their hope. And that's what that pastor is doing in that prison. There's an enemy of your soul that's out to destroy your love. He wants to destroy your love. You know, my wife and I are about ready to celebrate 27 years of marriage. "10 years in, we found ourselves in counseling. The psychologist ran a bunch of personality profiles and tests and things on us, and the psychology books literally said about the two of us that we're the two worst personalities you could put together, and it says this: these two personalities together, literally said, is the kiss of death. I went into the psychologist with the book, and I threw the psychology book down. I said, "You know what this says?" And he looked over at me and he goes, "It's true." But then he said this, "But if united on a vision together, you'd be unstoppable." You know, there's an inner of your soul that's out to destroy your love. And the greatest of the three that are to remain is love. And if you can look at our world today and look at what's happening in marriages and in families, you can look at where people sit on different political sides. You start reading Facebook posts and tweets, you'll see, and some of you might be guilty of getting pulled into the wrong debate, the wrong fight, the wrong post, the wrong tweets. Because we're distracted by the sharks when there's a crocodile in the water. And God tells us this. His word speaks this. It says this, God is love. You want to know love? You know God. If you know God, you know love. But listen, He's the source of love. But we've got an inner soul that gets us distracted with searching for love in all the wrong places. He is love, and He's the only source of love. And when you can tap into His love, you can be a resource of love. I was invited to go observe a dialogue in Algeria in a refugee camp with the Sahrawi people. The Sahrawi people have been living in this Sahara desert in uninhabitable land. One of the most difficult places on the planet to try to survive. They've been there now for 43 years. No running water. They just got electricity. But all of them have an iPhone. Very difficult place. Rustin's taken me all over the world. I've got to go to some amazing places. I'm invited to go to this place, and I want to be honest with you, I didn't want to go. In fact, I told God, I said, God, I said yes, but I don't want to go. In fact, I know that I should love these people. I know that I should care, and I just got to be honest, I don't. You ever been there? Where you know, but these two are not connected? I said, God, you're going to have to help me out. And I'm praying that because I was dreading this trip. This place is one of the top breeding grounds for ISIS and Al-Qaeda on the planet. It's a no-fly zone. No American and no Westerner are supposed to go anywhere near this place. I kind of like to Palau. 3 days before I was going to go, I thought, well, I should read up on the Sahrawi people. Find out who they are. And I started reading. And I found out that they're descendants of Beni Hassan. Now, I know by the look in your faces that meant nothing to you. It meant everything to me. For over 30 years, I've been doing wrestling camps and clinics, and I've done them all over the world, and I've been in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of wrestlers. And every camp, I show my signature move. I call it the greatest move known to man in the sport of wrestling. And I will talk about this move. I said this move is so great. By the way, this just an aside, wrestling is God's favorite sport. It's true. Go to Genesis 32, and you'll see. And it was Jesus that was wrestling, because it says this, I saw God face to face. This is what Jacob says. I saw God face to face, and I live to tell about it. I only know one God-man. Only one. And it was Jesus that challenged him to a wrestling match. He loves wrestling. at these wrestling camps, I talk about the tombs of Beni Hassan, because the tombs of Beni Hassan in the 21st century before Christ, 2,100 years before Christ, there are hieroglyphs that are painted on these cave walls of wrestling techniques that we still teach today. And it's awesome. And for over 3 decades, I talk about Beni Hassan. And I just found out the Sahrawi people are descendants of Beni Hassan. Do you know what happened to me overnight? I could not wait to go. These are my people. You've got to tap into the source of love. And he will reveal things to you that will shock you. You'll find a love that you didn't know that was there. You'll find a connection where you didn't know there was a connection. But if you try to do it on your own, through your own strength, we don't have it in us. We get it in him. There's an enemy of your soul that wants to steal your faith, that wants to kill your hope, that wants to destroy your love. It's the only three things he's after. But God's plan is for us to be a people of fearless faith, infectious hope, and relentless love. Church, this is where we have to fight the fight. We've got to quit being distracted. And my hope for you this morning is that your eyes are open. Now, as we go to respond, I want to say this. It's important first that you get honest with where you're at. You know, part of writing this book was not for other people to read. It was really about first of me getting honest. I had to deal with some stuff. I got a lot of stuff. Get honest. Secondly, we've got to get humble. Remember when I was in high school, I wandered into this Foursquare church out in Gresham. 1984. It's a big church. I'd sit in the back, and I would look at the people in this church, and I hated being there, but I was there every Sunday. You ever been there? And it was, it was one of those Foursquare churches where people, when they were playing songs, there were people with hands in the air like this, and they bothered me. It irritated me. And I would think, this was my worship posture, I would think, who do these people think they are? And I listen to the pastor get up and preach, and I think, I wonder what he's really like. As I sat in the back. One Sunday, I just remember being particularly bothered by the people. And you can imagine what I would have been thinking as people are over here waving banners and who do they think they are? And I'm bothered, and that night I went out to a little dance club downtown Portland, and I'm dancing. And I hear the Lord say to me, how come, Dan, do you know God can speak at a dance club? He says, Dan, how come you can raise your hands in the air for all the ladies, but you can't raise your hands for me? Next Sunday, I'm in church, my normal posture. And they're playing a song I didn't even like. It wasn't like I was getting goosebumps. The hair wasn't standing up. I had hair back then. But I sensed the Lord challenge me. And I had to make a decision. See, I had to get honest, and I had to get humble. And it's not about raising your hands, but it has everything to do with being humble. It has everything to do with being surrendered. And I remember saying, okay, God, I believe you're worthy of my praise. And I took my hands out of my pockets and I raised them. And I felt something in me break. You got to get honest. You got to get humble. If you do that, you get healed. You get healed. But it's as simple as that. So this morning, I want us to close by this. If you're here, and this morning, as I've been sharing about this place where the enemy of your soul is out to steal your faith, kill your hope, or destroy your love. If faith has been the area where the enemy has been coming after you, and you've been distracted by the pain or the things that are going on around you, and you realize today, no, that's where my fight is, I would ask you boldly to stand right where you are. If faith is where you're being challenged, faith. I don't know why for me this is so significant in that to have the boldness to stand for faith is to be fearless in faith. It's to move in that opposite spirit of what the enemy of your soul has been attacking. And merely by standing, you're breaking something in your life. You're breaking something in your life. And there's places where we've got to do stuff in the natural, like stand, which allows him to do something supernatural that only he can do. And it's his thing to do, not yours. And this is what's great. God does not put his faith in you. He puts his faith where he asks us to put our faith. His faith is in him. And he says, put your faith in me. And this is what he also says. He finishes what he begins. And he will finish what he's begun in you. I declare over you a people of fearless faith. Fearless faith. Because you put your faith and you're fighting in a place of faith where the enemy of your soul can no longer steal your faith. If you hear this morning, hope is the place where you know the enemy's been trying to kill my hope. Would you stand? Hope. Hope. You know, I watch people that are walking through cancer. I was recently diagnosed, I shared in 20-minute church, I was recently diagnosed with a liver disease, and what I recognize is the fight is not at the level of the disease. It's not cancer. Cancer is nothing more than a black-tipped shark. It's just a black-tipped shark. It's hope that the enemy of your soul's after. Hope. He wants to kill your hope. Don't fight at the level of the disease. Don't be distracted by that. Temporary. Found this side of eternity is 100% fatal anyways. So quit worrying about that. Put your hope that goes beyond this side of eternity. A hope that is forever. Fight there. Pray over you to be a people of infectious hope. Infectious hope. Like that pastor in that prison. No longer distracted with the disease and the darkness, but attracted to the one who loves him. The one that gives him hope. Be infectious with hope. Last, if love is the place where you've been battling, you recognize the enemy is trying to destroy your love, would you stand? I want to read an ancient prayer over you. It's been prayed for a couple thousand years. It's a good prayer. These are not my words. This comes directly out of God's Word, and it's a great prayer. I'm going to pray over you. I pray that out of God's glorious riches He may strengthen you with power through His Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in His love, may have the power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and that you would know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled, listen, filled to the full measure, the fullness of God in you. How big's God? And He wants to put all of who He is in you. The fullness of God, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. I declare over you relentless love. Can we all stand? These three shall remain: faith, hope, love. And the greatest of these is love. I want us to close this morning as we respond to the source of love. God is love. I'm going to have my wife lead us as we together in one voice declare this truth: the overwhelming, the never-ending, reckless love of God.